The sound of shattering glass echoed through our kitchen. I flinched, my body tensing as I stared at the fragments of what used to be my favorite coffee mug scattered across the linoleum floor. Jesus Christ, Nancy! Can't you do anything right? Richard's voice boomed, his face contorted with rage. I asked for coffee, not this lukewarm piss. I dropped to my knees, hands trembling as I began picking up the pieces. I'm sorry, I'll make you another cup. You just what? He sneered, looming over me. You just forgot? Like you forgot to pay the cable bill? Like you forgot to pick up my dry cleaning? I didn't forget, I whispered, carefully collecting the larger pieces of ceramic. I've been busy with the Anderson account at work, Anne. Oh, here we go again with your pathetic job, Richard cut me off, his voice dripping with disdain. Filing papers and answering phones. Real important work there, Nancy. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, focusing on the task at hand. 22 years of marriage had taught me that looking him in the eye during these moments only made things worse. At 48, I had mastered the art of becoming invisible in my own home. Look at me when I'm talking to you. His hand gripped my arm, yanking me up from the floor. A sharp pain shot through my shoulder as I stumbled to my feet, the glass fragments falling from my hands. Richard, please, I pleaded, finally meeting his gaze. You're hurting me. Hurting you? He laughed, a cold, harsh sound that turned my blood to ice. You don't know what hurt is. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. Richard's grip loosened slightly, his eyes darting toward the front door. Who the hell is that at this hour? He growled. I don't know, I said quietly, relief washing over me at the interruption. Mrs. Lawson? Mr. Lawson? This is Officer Reynolds with the Seattle Police Department. We received a call about a disturbance at this address. Richard's face paled, his hand falling away from my arm. Don't you dare say a word, he hissed, straightening his tie. I'll handle this. And just like that, Dr. Jekyll replaced Mr. Hyde. Richard's entire demeanor shifted as he strode toward the door, his posture relaxed, a practiced smile spreading across his face. Officer, what a surprise, I heard him say as he opened the door. Is everything all right? I stood frozen in the kitchen, rubbing my arm where his fingers had dug into my skin. Another bruise to hide, another lie to tell at work on Monday. We received a call from one of your neighbors, a deep voice explained. They reported hearing shouting and something breaking. Oh, that, Richard laughed easily. Just a little accident in the kitchen. My wife dropped a mug, and I'll admit, I overreacted a bit. Been under a lot of stress at work lately. I moved toward the hallway, drawn by a force I couldn't name. My eyes met those of the officer standing in our doorway, kind eyes, observant, taking in every detail of our immaculate living room, then shifting to me, lingering on my arm where I was still unconsciously rubbing the fresh injury. Ma'am, are you all right? He asked, his voice gentle but firm. Before I could answer, Richard turned to me, his smile never faltering, though his eyes held a warning. Honey, tell the officer what happened with the coffee mug. I swallowed hard, 22 years of conditioning battling with a sudden, desperate urge to tell the truth. I dropped it, I managed, my voice barely audible. The officer, Reynolds, according to his nameplate, nodded slowly. Mind if I come in for a moment? Just to make sure everything's okay. Richard's smile tightened. Is that really necessary, officer? It's late, and my wife and I were just about to turn in for the night. It won't take long, sir, Officer Reynolds replied, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Richard stepped aside, his jaw clenched. Of course. We have nothing to hide. As Officer Reynolds entered our home, I felt something shift inside me, a tiny crack in the foundation of fear I'd built my life upon. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a different ending to my story. Officer James Reynolds had been to our house 3 times in the past 2 months. Each visit followed the same pattern: a concerned call from a neighbor, Richard's practiced explanations, my silent compliance, and the officer's increasingly suspicious gaze. "Mrs. Lawson," he said during his 3rd visit, while Richard was retrieving his business card to report that hooligan kid next door who he claimed was responsible for the noise, "here's my card. If you ever need to talk, for any reason, call this number." I'd taken it with trembling fingers, quickly tucking it into my pocket before Richard returned. That night, I'd hidden it in the lining of my wallet, behind the faded photo of my mother, never intending to use it. Yet here I was, 2 weeks later, sitting in my car in the parking lot of Preston Park, the card worn from my constant handling, the number now memorized. My cheek still throbbed from where Richard's hand had connected with it the night before, all because I'd forgotten to record his favorite show. "This is the last straw, Nancy," he'd snarled, his breath hot on my face as he pinned me against the wall. "You're becoming more useless every day." I'd gone to work this morning as usual, applied an extra layer of foundation to hide the bruising, and smiled at my coworkers as though nothing was wrong. But something had changed. The card in my wallet felt like it was burning a hole through the leather, demanding action. My fingers hovered over my phone's keypad, doubt crawling through my mind. What if Officer Reynolds didn't remember me? What if he didn't care? What if Richard found out? Before I could change my mind, I dialed the number. "Reynolds," a voice answered on the 3rd ring. "Officer Reynolds? This is Nancy Lawson. From Ma. PLE Street? You've been to our house a few times for disturbances." A pause. "Mrs. Lawson. Yes, I remember. Are you all right?" The genuine concern in his voice broke something loose inside me. "No," I whispered, tears filling my eyes. "No, I'm not all right. I haven't been all right for a very long time." "Where are you now?" he asked, his tone shifting to professional urgency. "Preston Park. In my car." "Stay there," he said firmly. "I'm off duty, but I'm not far. 10 minutes, tops." True to his word, a dark blue sedan pulled up beside my car 8 minutes later. Officer Reynolds, James, as he introduced himself once he wasn't in uniform, sat across from me at a picnic table, his eyes taking in the poorly concealed bruise on my cheek. "Tell me everything," he said simply. And I did. 22 years of verbal abuse, escalating to physical violence over the past 5. The isolation from friends and family. The controlled finances. The constant fear. "Why now?" he asked when I finally fell silent. "What made you call today?" I stared at my hands, at the wedding ring that had once symbolized love and now felt like a shackle. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe I'm finally tired enough. Or scared enough." James nodded, his expression somber. "What do you want to happen next, Nancy?" The question caught me off guard. No one had asked what I wanted in so long. "I don't know that either," I confessed. "I just know I can't go back to that house tonight." "You don't have to," he assured me. "There are resources, people who can help. Safe places you can stay." "He'll find me," I whispered, the familiar fear creeping back. "He always says he will." James leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Not this time. Not if we do this right." "We." Such a small word, yet it held such power. "We." I wasn't alone anymore. "Okay," I said, straightening my shoulders. "Tell me what to do." The women's shelter was nothing like I'd imagined. No dingy bunk beds or institutional walls. Instead, I found myself in a converted Victorian home, filled with comfortable furniture and warm colors. My room was small but private, with a twin bed covered in a patchwork quilt and a window that overlooked a small garden. "First night's always the hardest," said Meredith, the shelter's director, a silver-haired woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. But you're safe here, Nancy. No one gets in without authorization, and your husband doesn't know where you are. I nodded, though the knot in my stomach refused to loosen. Richard would be home by now, discovering my absence, the hastily packed overnight bag, the note I'd left saying I needed time to think. I could almost hear his reaction, the rage, the threats, the promises to find me. Try to get some rest, Meredith suggested, patting my shoulder. Tomorrow, we'll start figuring out your next steps. Next steps. The concept seemed both terrifying and exhilarating. For so long, my life had been about survival, about getting through each day without triggering Richard's anger. The idea of planning a future, my future, was almost too much to comprehend. I didn't sleep that night, instead sitting by the window, watching the moon traverse the sky, wondering if Richard was out there searching for me. My phone, which James had advised me to turn off, sat heavy in my pocket. I knew Richard would be calling, texting, his messages growing increasingly desperate, then threatening. Morning came with a gentle knock on my door and the scent of coffee wafting from the kitchen downstairs. I joined the other women, 4 of them, each with their own story written in the shadows of their eyes, at the breakfast table. "First day's the worst," said a woman named Tara, sliding a mug of coffee toward me. "It gets easier, though. Promise." Over the next week, I learned the rhythm of the shelter. Morning check-ins with the staff. Group therapy sessions. Individual counseling. Legal advice from volunteer attorneys. Through it all, I found myself thinking of James, Officer Reynolds, wondering if he remembered me, if he ever thought about the woman he'd helped escape. I got my answer on day 9, when Meredith approached me after dinner. "There's someone here to see you," she said, her expression neutral. "A police officer. Says his name is Reynolds." My heart stuttered in my chest. Is something wrong? Did Richard? "No, nothing like that," she assured me. "He says he just wanted to check on you. It's unusual, but he's been cleared by security. You don't have to see him if you don't want to." But I did want to. More than I was willing to admit, even to myself. James stood in the shelter's small visitor's room, looking different in jeans and a gray sweater instead of his uniform. He smiled when he saw me, relief evident in his eyes. "Nancy," he said, keeping a respectful distance. "You look better." "I feel better," I replied, surprised to find it was true. The constant tension in my shoulders had eased, and I'd slept through the night twice now. "Thank you for coming. I wanted to update you," he explained, gesturing for me to sit. "Your husband has been making quite a scene. Filed a missing persons report, despite the note you left. Been calling the station daily, demanding we find you." Fear quailed in my stomach. "Has he?" "No," James said quickly. "He has no idea where you are. But Nancy, you should know, he's not giving up easily." I nodded, wrapping my arms around myself. "I didn't think he would." "Have you thought about what comes next?" James asked gently. I had, in fact, spent most of my waking hours thinking about it. "I can't go back," I said, the words feeling like a victory. "I'm filing for divorce." James's approval was evident in his smile. That's good, Nancy. Really good." "I'm scared," I admitted. "But I'm more scared of going back." "That's how you know you're making the right choice," he said. "Listen, I know this is unconventional, but would it be okay if I check in on you now and then? Just to see how you're doing with everything?" The warmth that spread through me at his words was unexpected but not unwelcome. "I'd like that," I said softly. And so began a new routine. James would visit once a week, always in the evening after his shift. We'd sit in the visitor's room, sometimes talking about my case, the restraining order I'd filed, the divorce proceedings I'd initiated with the help of a pro bono attorney, And sometimes just sharing stories from our lives. I learned that James was 45, divorced for 5 years, with a teenage daughter who lived with her mother in Portland. He'd been a cop for 20 years, the last 7 in domestic violence response. He loved baseball, hated reality TV, and made a mean vegetable soup. My mom's recipe, he explained during one visit. Got me through some tough times after my divorce. You'll have to share it sometime, I said, then blushed at my presumption. James just smiled. I'd like that. 3 weeks turned into 6, then 8. I moved from the shelter to a small apartment subsidized by a victim's assistance program. Found a new job at a different accounting firm across town. Started therapy to unpack the years of abuse and begin the long process of rebuilding my sense of self. Through it all, James remained a constant, a friend, a support, a reminder that not all men were like Richard. And if our weekly meetings gradually evolved into something that felt suspiciously like dates, coffee at a cafe halfway between my apartment and the station, walks in the park on his days off, neither of us acknowledged it directly. You're different, James remarked one evening as we strolled along the waterfront. From when I first met you. I considered this. I'm finding my way back to who I was before Richard, I said slowly. Or maybe discovering who I am without him defining me. James nodded, his hand brushing against mine as we walked. I like who you are, he said simply. The divorce proceedings dragged on, Richard fighting every step of the way. He contested the restraining order, though the evidence, police reports, photographs of my injuries taken at the shelter, testimonies from neighbors, was overwhelming. He refused initial settlement offers, demanding we sell the house and split the proceeds, though I wanted nothing but my freedom. He's punishing you, my attorney, Lisa, explained during one of our meetings. Making this as difficult and prolonged as possible. It's another form of control. I understood this all too well. He won't break me, I said with newfound determination. Not again. It was around this time that Mrs. Hernandez, my neighbor from across the street, reached out. She'd been one of the neighbors who had called the police multiple times over the years, though I hadn't known it until James confirmed it. I should have done more, she said, her weathered hands clutching mine as we sat in her cozy living room. All those years, Hiran. Gee, what was happening, seeing your bruises. I should have done more than just call the police. You did more than most, I assured her, touched by her guilt. Those calls probably saved my life. Mrs. Hernandez became another unexpected ally, along with her husband Miguel, who installed better locks on my apartment door and windows just in case. Their daughter Sophia, a law student, offered to help with paperwork and accompanied me to court hearings when James couldn't. My world, which had shrunk to the size of my marriage under Richard's control, was slowly expanding again. I had friends. Support. A life that was increasingly my own. But Richard wasn't finished. 9 months after I'd left, as the divorce was finally nearing completion, he found me. I was leaving work, keys in hand, when I heard his voice behind me in the parking garage. Hello, Nancy. I froze, my body remembering the fear before my mind could process it. Slowly, I turned to face him. Richard looked different, thinner, his once impeccable appearance slightly disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. But the cold calculation in his gaze was all too familiar. What are you doing here? I asked, proud that my voice remained steady. Looking for my wife, he replied, taking a step closer. You know, the one who ran away in the middle of the night like a thief. I held my ground, though every instinct screamed at me to run. I'm not your wife anymore, Richard. The divorce will be final next month. He laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the concrete structure. Is that what you think? That you can just walk away after 22 years? Start over with your cop boyfriend? My blood ran cold. How do you? I've been watching you, he said, his voice dangerously soft. 4 weeks now. You and him, playing house, acting like you have the right to be happy. You need to leave, I said firmly, reaching for my phone. The restraining order is just a piece of paper, Richard snarled, lunging forward suddenly. His hand closed around my wrist, twisting until I cried out in pain and dropped my phone. I heard it clatter to the ground as Richard backed me against my car, his face inches from mine. You think you can humiliate me like this? He hissed. Make me the talk of the neighborhood? The office? Poor Richard, whose wife left him for a cop. Let go of me, I demanded, struggling against his grip. Or what? He sneered. You'll scream? Go ahead. No one's around to hear you. But he was wrong. A car engine roared to life nearby, headlights suddenly illuminating us. Richard squinted against the brightness, momentarily distracted. I seized the opportunity, bringing my knee up sharply between his legs. Richard doubled over with a howl of pain, releasing my wrist. I scrambled away, lunging for my phone. Nancy! James's voice called out as he emerged from his car, hand on his holster. Are you okay? Richard straightened, his face contorted with rage. Of course, he spat. Your knight in shining armor. Step away from her, Mr. Lawson, James ordered, his voice cold and professional. You're in violation of a restraining order. This is between me and my wife, Richard snarled. Ex-wife, I corrected, finding courage in James's presence. And there's nothing between us anymore, Richard. It's over. Richard's gaze darted between us, calculating. This isn't over, he promised. Not by a long shot. But it was. James arrested Richard on the spot for violating the restraining order. Additional charges followed when they found tracking software he'd installed on my old laptop before I left, which I'd kept in storage, and evidence that he'd been stalking me for weeks. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later, with Richard still in custody awaiting trial. I kept my maiden name, Montgomery, reclaiming that small piece of my identity. How does it feel? James asked as we left the courthouse, the final papers signed and filed. Being officially free? I considered the question, tilting my face up to the sun. Terrifying, I admitted. Exhilarating. Like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, but instead of falling, I might just fly. James smiled, taking my hand in his. I think you will, he said softly. Fly, I mean. 1 year to the day after I'd left Richard, I stood in my new kitchen, arranging flowers in a vase. My apartment was small but filled with things I'd chosen myself, bright colors, soft textures, plants that thrived under my care. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a coffee mug, was an invitation to Mrs. Hernandez's 70th birthday party. Beside it, a photograph of me with the women from my support group, all of us smiling at a picnic in the park. The doorbell rang, and I felt a flutter of anticipation. I'd been seeing James officially for 4 months now, our relationship evolving cautiously, respectfully. He understood my need for independence, for space, for time to heal. I understood his dedication to his job, his devotion to his daughter, his own scars from a failed marriage. Coming? I called, checking my reflection in the hallway mirror. At 49, I looked younger than I had at 48, the constant stress had lifted from my face, leaving behind a woman I was still getting to know. I opened the door to find James holding a small gift bag. Happy anniversary, he said with a smile. Anniversary? I echoed, confused. 1 year since you chose yourself, he explained, handing me the bag. That deserves celebration. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant shaped like a bird in flight. I traced it with my fingertip, tears welling in my eyes. To remind you, James said softly, that you can fly. I invited him in, and as we sat together on my couch, his arm around my shoulders, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The fear, the pain, the doubt. The moments of weakness when I'd almost called Richard, almost gone back to the familiar prizzo. End of my marriage. The strength I'd found in myself, and in the community that had gathered around me. Penny for your thoughts? James asked, his voice rumbling against my ear. I was just thinking about how life can change, I replied. How people can change, if they're brave enough to try. And are you? He asked. Brave enough? I turned to face him, seeing in his eyes the question he wasn't quite asking. We'd been taking things slowly, both of us wary of rushing into something new before I'd fully healed from the old. I'm getting there, I said honestly. Some days are harder than others. I still have nightmares sometimes. Still flinch at loud noises. Still worry that Richard will find a way to hurt me again when he gets out. James nodded, understanding. And other days? Other days, I said, leaning closer, I feel like I can do anything. Be anything. Love. I hesitated, then pushed through. Love anyone I choose. His smile was worth the momentary vulnerability. I can work with that, he said, closing the distance between us. As his lips met mine, gentle and unhurried, I realized that this moment, this choice, this man, was mine. Not because I needed saving, but because I had saved myself. And in doing so, I'd found not just freedom from Richard, but the freedom to build something new, something better, something entirely of my own choosing. The road ahead wasn't certain. Richard would be released eventually. My healing wasn't complete. James and I had our own challenges to navigate. But for the first time in decades, I faced the future not with fear, but with hope. And really, isn't that the most powerful form of freedom there is?